My name is Shay McGowan, and I'm here to present to you what my educational pedagogy is and what I believe in terms of what a pedagogy is. I've been teaching 19 years, and my pedagogy has gone through so many different changes throughout since those 19 years. And when I got started thinking about what my pedagogy was, I also started thinking about another journey that I had starting 19 years ago. I had a son when I was 19. I had a son 19 years ago. And so as he grew, got on to something called a weight loss journey. And so I want to kind of put those synonymous together because they really did grow together, and I will try to relate that as we go. The first slide that I have here for you is a picture of my very first school picture when I was a teacher, and this was me 19 years ago. It's a little blurry, but you can see that is me, okay? And then this is a picture of me now. This picture was taken this past winter, and so this is what I look 19 years later. And with that journey, when I started my journey, I actually bought, this is the very last pair of pants that I bought prior to my weight loss journey. And you could see that this is me now. And so I am actually half of what I was when I started. So my weight loss journey was pretty drastic, which that's exactly how I look at my educational pedagogy. It has changed drastically as well. When I first started teaching, my son was just a baby, and he was at home and he was learning how to crawl, learning how to walk. This is my son Zachary here. I, you know, really was the same teacher for 4 or 5 years. And in that teaching, my kids sat in rows, they looked at me, I delivered the content, and they took notes and practiced. My whole goal was they had to be ready for that next class. Well, then, as Zachary grew and he went into elementary school, he started getting very curious. And so I thought, well, my students then are probably pretty curious too. And so then I built in that curiosity part of teaching. And we had some bumps and like ups and downs, just like my weight loss was going on. I'd gain, lose. That's what was happening. I was changing things a little bit at a time. And my students became more collaborative instead of sitting and watching me, looking at me in rows. And then from there, when my son entered middle school and high school, he started building relationships with his teachers. And I saw that the more he liked the teacher, the harder he worked for that teacher. And I thought, well, I don't really know my students all that well. I know them as math students, but that's about it. So I felt that I needed to start building that relationship as well with my students and getting to know them, letting them to get to know me. And so my classroom then become very, very collaborative, very interactive. I was still focusing more on content, but I started thinking about that curiosity and that relationship. And then it wasn't until 3, 4 years ago that I started thinking, I need to do more. I need to let my kids know that they can trust me and that I trust them. And that way, true learning can actually develop and let those kids be risk takers. And so that's where this goes with this slide is. I think my kids, the safest place for my kids to fail is in my room. And I want them to fail in my room. I don't want them failing outside of my room. And that allows them to be risk takers. And so now that could be in many forms. Students can make a first attempt and they fail. Well, then they learn why they failed. And then that next attempt leads to that success. Or you might see kids taking an attempt and failing, and then learning about it, and then trying again, but then failing again, but then learning more about it, and then succeeding. And so that cycle is very, dependent on what the task is and what the kids are. So kids do learn at different paces in that sense. I also believe students need guidelines from my classroom. They need to know what your expectation is, and when they respect you and that relationship is developed, then it's so much easier to get things done. They need to know what you allow them to do and what they're not allowed to do. And I also believe that regardless of a background, every kid can learn. and we just need to provide them the resources to allow them to learn. I believe that kids want to learn, and there are just other things that are affecting them. But if we get past that effectiveness, then they actually can learn. And that's my growth mindset in terms of pedagogy. I don't know that I believed that 19 years ago. I don't know that I would have believed 19 years ago that I could have lost 120 pounds either. And so that is where, my pedagogy is changing week by week, day by day, but it's in developing much. So if this last slide here kind of puts it all together, all of these are pieces of what I believe is my pedagogy. Mainly, though, the big one being that relationship piece. Students need to know to trust you before they can work. And these are me and my students. So that's how I think of my pedagogy.